Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is my co-host from Long Island, New York, Austin Davidson.
Heyo.
It's Season 2, Episode 63, January 8th, 2018. Wildcard weekend is over, Austin. Before we jump into those games, we are now just a couple weeks away from knowing who the Super Bowl is going to be between. It's the playoffs is a great time of year, and we're moving through it pretty quick. But first and foremost, we'll jump into some Steelers news. With the results on Sunday and Saturday between the Titans and Chiefs and the Jaguars and Bills, the Steelers are going to play host to the Jaguars this upcoming Sunday at 1:05. The Steelers have opened as 7-point favorites. Weather is anticipated to be around 20 degrees with between 5 to 15 mile an hour winds. So we'll actually have our own preview episode later in the week, but since it's Monday, we figured we'd give you kind of a recap of what's been going on throughout the wildcard week in the NFL. Antonio Brown was seen running routes with Chad Johnson on, I believe it was Twitter. I think Chad Johnson posted them himself. It's quite encouraging. I think was it a week or two ago we saw Brown struggling to kind of walk through his driveway, walk up the stairs, and the progression has kind of been very good. And it looks like he's going to be pretty much himself when they take the field on Sunday. Ian Rappaport of NFL.com reported yesterday that Brown is supposed to be 100% when Sunday rolls around. That's a huge bit of news for the Steelers. And the NFL All-Pro teams were named last week, and 4 of them are Steelers on the All-Pro team. Starting with Cameron Hayward picking up his first All-Pro honor, David DeCastro being named the first-team guard, Le'Veon Bell being named second-team running back and first-team flex, and Antonio Brown, who was the All-Pro selection at wide receiver, the only unanimous pick this season on the All-Pro team. So a lot of worthy Steelers getting their recognition that they deserve, perhaps none more so than Cameron Hayward, who was snubbed from the Pro Bowl voting, getting some recognition that he deserves there. Do you have anything you wanted to add to everything we just talked about?
Yeah, the next closest team to have 4 All-Pros only had 2. The next closest team only had 2 All-Pros on it.
Interesting. So, as far as the divisional weekend coming up, the matchups are all set. It's going to be the Tennessee Titans visiting the New England Patriots on Saturday night. The Falcons visiting the top-seeded Eagles on, I think that's Saturday too, right?
Yes, I believe so.
And then the Saints and Vikings are the other matchup on the NFC side. That's a 4 o'clock start on Saturday. And as we know, the Steelers play the Jaguars on Sunday afternoon. The NFL is also looking into the handling of the concussion protocol conducted by the Panthers and Cam Newton against the Saints today. Did you get a chance to see anything about that?
I didn't see any updates. I just saw that they were going into it.
Newton suffered a tough hit where he actually, I think, was walking off the field, then had to sort of sit down or kneel down. But based on what we're seeing from NFL.com, there's nothing new going on that instance. The NFL is apparently looking into slur accusations against Richie Incognito. So, that's great. We get to see some more controversy from him, but, it's the NFL, so I don't know. Do you remember the whole Richie Incognito situation a few years ago?
Yeah, where he used racial slurs the first time? Yeah, texted someone. I forget who he texted, though.
Jonathan Martin.
Yeah, I remember it happening and it being racial slurs. I didn't remember who it was.
I was very close to that situation because my favorite teacher was a huge football fan and he was a Dolphins fan when all that was happening. So that was almost like a daily discussion in class. But in any case, let's jump right into the games. Let's start with the first game Saturday, a 4:25 kickoff between the number 4 seeded Kansas City Chiefs and the 5th seeded Tennessee Titans. Kansas City jumped out to an early lead in this one and really had their way, but Tennessee came roaring back and managed to win 22-21 as the final score. So before we get into the actual recap, Austin, we had our own bold predictions and X Factors. So your X Factors for this game were Travis Kelce and Delaney Walker, the tight ends for both teams. How'd they perform based on, I guess, your picking of them?
Kelsey, I think, really was the X factor in this one. If he didn't leave the game, I think the Chiefs rally to win this. He did good when he was in the game, catching all 4 of his targets, and was the second leading receiver with 66 yards, despite leaving early with a concussion. And then Walker really made the difference for his team as well. I think I picked the best X factors I could here, as he led the Titans in receptions and yards, catching 6 passes for 74 yards. So that's how mine panned out. How did Derek Johnson and Rashard Matthews perform for you?
Linebacker Derek Johnson of the Kansas City Chiefs was one of the better defensive players on the Chiefs throughout. He led his team in tackles and added a big sack on Marcus Mariota that probably questionable whether or not that could have been called a penalty, but the defense did fall flat in the second half and couldn't stop Derrick Henry with the game on the line, so he didn't come through as much as you probably would have liked for him to have if I made him my X Factor choice. On the other side, I picked Rashard Matthews of the Tennessee Titans, a wide receiver, deep threat. He was not really impressive at all and didn't contribute much to the winning effort at all, with only 1 catch for 15 yards. So I missed the mark here. And as far as my bold predictions go, Austin, they were bold and they were awful. So I'm not even going to bother commenting on mine, but you're welcome to talk about yours if you like.
No, all mine were bad, too. I didn't even get close to the final score. Obviously, I had the Chiefs winning, so, yeah, we could just go straight into the recap.
Okay, so I guess a lot of the bold predictions had to do with the fact that we thought the Chiefs were going to win this game pretty handily, and for about a half, it looked like that was going to be the case. It looked like, excuse me, it looked like things really did change when Travis Kelce went out, but that just doesn't excuse what happened. So I guess tell me about what you thought about from what you saw from this game.
Well, the Chiefs blew it. The interesting that only the Steelers play down to their opponents. Well, I would like to introduce everyone to the 2017 Kansas City Chiefs in this 2018 playoff game. A variety of factors played into this loss. The biggest one for me, however, is coaching mistakes. How does Kareem Hunt finish with 11 carries when the Chiefs were up 21-3 at one point? How does that even happen? The Chiefs just abandoned the run game, and that's on the coaches, not the players. Titans may not have had the time to make the 18-point comeback had Hunt ran the ball 18 to 20 times in this one, which they definitely could have. Bad coaching wasn't the only factor, though. As I mentioned earlier, despite the Chiefs imploding, I still hold that if they never lost Kelce, they still would have won this game. They would have at least gotten 3 more points, in my opinion. But that's all what ifs. Another thing was that the defense looked tired and lazy against the run, with the addition of Derrick Henry being an absolute monster. He had nearly 200 scrimmage yards and a touchdown, and his future looks bright, and I honestly hope the Titans trade Murray in the offseason and let Henry be the feature back, as he definitely looks ready. Other than Henry, Mariota did pretty good when he was asked to throw, above average and great for him, throwing 2 touchdowns and only 1 interception. And one of those touchdowns was to himself, which in itself was impressive. It's the only time in a playoff game it's happened where a player has thrown a touchdown and caught a touchdown, and it happened in one play. The Titans were just unfazed coming into Arrowhead, just as the last 5 teams before them were. Chiefs hold the longest active playoff home losing streak at one of the loudest stadiums there are. I don't even get how that's possible, to be honest with you. Home field advantage is supposed to be best when your stadium is loud, and that is, Arrowhead is literally, I think, has the record for the loudest stadium ever. Like, they set the record for decibels, but they just can't win there. Maybe it's hurting them. Maybe it's too loud. Who knows? What did you see from the both teams in this game?
Well, another year, another playoff failure for Andy Reid and the Chiefs. This loss was very painful. At halftime, it really looked like the Chiefs were just going to coast into the second round. They methodically orchestrated a beatdown of what looked like an inferior team, scoring touchdowns on half of their drives in the first half. Steve Young went so far as to say that Alex Smith had one of the best halves a quarterback has ever had in the playoffs. So where did things go wrong? And Austin, you touched on most of this, but first things first, I want to give the Titans a lot of credit for sticking to their identity when the game could have easily been given up. They continued to give the ball to Derrick Henry, and he rewarded them handsomely. It was a nice coming out party for the young runner. He clearly showed he's the future of this organization on the ground, and I'd be shocked. There's no reason to hand the reins to DeMarco Murray again should he play. This is Derrick Henry's ground game for sure. Mariota played a much better game than he had most of this season, even though he threw a bad interception to Marcus Peters in this game that killed a potential scoring drive. I felt like he really did do it all in this game, and even if he wasn't super, efficient in the air, he did just enough. He was 19 of 31 for 205 in the air, and he was effective when he was asked to run with the ball or, I guess, improvise. And that was enough for a Titans passing attack that really wasn't all that special, but a Chiefs defense that was starting to, I guess, tire out, if you will. And on the other side, the Titans and Dick LeBeau deserve credit for shutting down the Chiefs' passing attack in the second half. And while they do deserve credit for sticking to the fight in this game, the Chiefs deserve equally, if not more, criticism for the way they lost this game. I've seen fans blaming Alex Smith for this loss, and yes, he did miss a throw on fourth down, and he probably shouldn't have thrown it that deep, but he never should have had to make that throw in the first place. The defense completely fell apart in the second half. The Titans, Austin, scored touchdowns on every drive of the game in the second half. Scored on every drive of the second half, touchdowns, except for their last one, where they lost the game. The defense simply had no answers, and they got little help from an offense that handed the ball off to Kareem Hunt 5 times in the second half. A guy who led the league in rushing got 5 carries in the second half with his team up by 18 points at the start of the half. That is not defendable by anybody. And the Chiefs really did blow this game, and the Titans, as I said, do deserve credit for coming back, but the Chiefs badly mismanaged this game. And it's just really, as you mentioned with the whole Arrowhead advantage, it's really just mind-boggling. I guess it'd be one thing if they played badly early, but they were up by 18 points in this game, and this is now the second time it's happened 4 times in the playoffs that there's been an 18-plus point comeback in the playoffs. 2 of them have been blown by Andy Reid coach teams. The other one, I believe, was the 2014 playoffs. I think it was a 25-point comeback by Andrew Luck and the Colts over the Chiefs. But I don't know. I'm trying to think about, what could is it just it's something. It has to be something mental at this point. What else could it be?
I honestly have no idea. It literally doesn't make any sense. It's an anomaly, really.
And as far as the loudness, Austin, you're right. That it's been them in the Seahawks stadium. It seems like every year they kind of flip-flop which has the loudest stadium technically, but they definitely have one of the louder stadiums in the NFL, and it's really we're all at a loss as to why they just can't get it done. So another year, back to the drawing board. I guess we'll look at kind of the ramifications of this loss in a little bit, but on to the next game. The nightcap was a late night game at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, the first Rams playoff game in LA, I believe, since the 1980s was I believe what I saw. They had an interesting graphic. They had a couple interesting things. It was that Sean McVay, the Rams coach, beat Calvin Johnson for the Georgia High School Player of the Year in high school. One year. How interesting is that?
That is so weird. It's weird to think that they're the same age.
You know what else is going to be mind-boggling? McVay's freshman year at college, he was a receiver at Miami University where Ben Roethlisberger went to school, but they actually weren't teammates because Ben Roethlisberger was in his rookie year at the NFL.
That's crazy. Yeah.
31-year-old Sean McVay. Yeah, youngest coach in the NFL, right?
Yeah, I think so.
In any case, the Rams' storybook turnaround season was not meant to be. The Falcons came in there and bludgeoned them, if you will, by a final score of 26-13. A good defensive battle, but the Falcons pulled this one out. So how did your X Factors turn out, Austin, and who were your X Factors?
My X-Factors were Cooper Kupp and Desmond Trufant. Kupp was sort of a mixed bag. He didn't have that high of a catch rate, only catching 8 of his 13 targets, and didn't have that many yards, only totaling 69. But he did have a touchdown, so he did okay. And Trufant, on the other hand, did pretty solid in this one, breaking up 2 passes and also making 5 tackles, 4 of them being solo. He also did pretty good in coverage for the most part. So how did your X-Factors turn out?
I had wide receiver Sammy Watkins of the Rams and tight end Austin Hooper of the Atlanta Falcons. I was correct in naming Watkins an X Factor because I figured his performance would contribute to a win or loss depending on how he performed. And it can't be proven necessarily, but I'm willing to bet that had he had more catches than what he had, it would have helped the Rams in perhaps winning this game. Watkins had just 1 catch for 23 yards and was only targeted 4 times. His performance didn't do enough to get the win, but you have to wonder how the game might have changed had Watkins come down with at least one more of those deep balls. Austin Hooper, on the other hand, was about the same as we've seen all year from him, which is pretty average. He caught 3 passes for 15 yards. I'm looking back and questioning myself why I would have expected more from him when this has kind of been the status quo for what we've seen from him all season. And then in this game, my bold predictions, Austin, weren't actually too far off, but they were wrong in the sense that I predicted the game to turn out a certain way, and they didn't turn out a certain way. So it could have been, I guess, false correct predictions, if that makes any sense. So allow me to explain. I believe I predicted Todd Gurley to have, I think, 125, 150 total yards, and he went over 100 yards on the ground, but he wasn't exactly a huge factor. He had a few big runs that really contributed to that large number. For the most part, when he touched the ball, I didn't feel like he was doing a lot. Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman didn't put up huge numbers. You look at their yards per carry, it's not very pretty. But in the second half, they were actually very instrumental in a couple of long drives that the Falcons turned into 10 points. So I thought that they were pretty good. And Jared Goff didn't have terrible numbers. He finished 24-45 for 259, a touchdown, no picks. But he clearly was not having his best day and was harassed constantly. Finally, Matt Ryan faced some pressure and was sacked 3 times instead of 5 times. I predicted 3 from Aaron Donald, but even though he wasn't as impactful on the stat sheet, Austin, I watched this game from start to finish. Do yourself a favor and watch some of this game. I can't remember seeing a player you know how they say watch a player, I guess, just like kind of see like what he does in the game. Don't watch the football like a normal football fan. Watch just what one player does. I did that in this game, and I was just amazed. I'd never seen a player win so many battles on every play. He was in the backfield on practically every play. And even though he only finished with half a sack, I felt like he was doing everything to keep his team in it. And he was, there were only a few plays that I remember where Donald was not in full control of this game. So I just wanted to mention that. But how were your bold predictions panning out in this one?
My bold predictions didn't work out at all, and I predicted the Rams to win, and that really messed it up. Kupp only got the singular touchdown and lost, so he didn't have that clutch game-ending touchdown. Falcons didn't force a fumble, only recovered muff punts, and also there weren't any interceptions in this game, so I was wrong about the forced fumble and recovery, and then also an interception for the Falcons. And then Freeman did not go over 120 rush yards. He was relatively quiet for most of the day. Alex Mack basically got his touchdown for him. But, yeah, we could just jump straight into the recap.
I should actually mention this, that we both picked the Chiefs to cover on Saturday, right? For Saturday.
Yeah, we both picked the Chiefs to cover.
And I'm pretty sure I picked the Rams to cover too, so that blew mine up as well. I should also mention. I guess across the board, this looked like a pretty even game based on the stats, but as is often the case in football, especially in the playoffs, turnovers were the key difference. Rams return man Pharaoh Cooper, who I believe is heading to the Pro Bowl, had probably his worst day as a pro. He fumbled twice on kick returns and was nearly responsible for another muff punt that hit him. Luckily for him, it doesn't go in the stats as a muff for him because it hit one of his teammates first. And he almost fumbled a third time on a kickoff. One of the fumbles led directly to the Falcons' first touchdown of the game, which made it 13-0 at the time. In an evenly played game at the time, the miscues of the special teams unit in Cooper loomed very large. The Falcons did just enough on offense to break through in the first half, and in the second half they got going, and the stats won't show it, but as I said, the rushing attack was very good in the second half, leading to 10 points on their first 2 drives of the second half. Matt Ryan wasn't great, and he was knocked around a bit. This is another thing I noticed, is that the turf at the Coliseum just was not very good. I saw players slipping around. Matt Ryan almost got hurt because he almost did like a leg split there, but he was okay. He orchestrated a terrific 8-play, 83-yard drive with the game on the line, a one-score game, and he essentially put it out of reach with a beautiful touch pass to Julio Jones in the end zone. Something that only happened once this season, a passing touchdown to Julio Jones in the red zone. On the other side, the Falcons did a great job of harassing Todd Gurley and Jared Goff. As I said, Gurley finished with over 100 yards, but most of them came on just a couple plays. In the passing game, it took midway through the fourth quarter for Goff to connect with someone that wasn't named Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, or Todd Gurley. Gurley was a non-factor in the passing game. He had 1 yard on, I believe, 3 catches for the majority of the game, finishing with 10 yards. That meant that Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods had but all but one of the receptions for about 3.5 quarters. With a struggling running game, that's just not going to get it done. It was a tough end for an upstart Rams team, but the playoff experience showed in this game, and the Falcons finally showed that their defense is, it's not the same unit that lost the game to the Patriots in the Super Bowl. They aren't the same Falcons that blew a 25-point lead in the Super Bowl. They're hungry, and, you can tell they want some revenge in this one. What did you see from this one, Austin?
This didn't really turn out as close as I had hoped. I knew the Rams had a decent chance at losing, but thought they would keep it close regardless. They didn't. The Rams' offense we saw in regular season disappeared, and the Falcons' defense pretty much held them in check the entire night. Really, defensive backs and linebackers did really well for the Falcons, namely Deion Jones and Keanu O'Neal. Between the two of them, they had 18 tackles and each had a pass defended. So they did spectacular, stopping Todd Gurley as well as stopping the Rams getting many big plays from their explosive offense. In fact, the longest play they had was a 38-yard reception by Robert Woods, and that was really it. The next biggest game they got after that was a 23-yarder from Sammy Watkins. So not many of those are big, explosive games. Also, the Rams shot themselves in the foot. As I said in the preview, if they kept up with the fumbling, they could lose this game, and they fumbled twice, losing the ball both times, while the Falcons didn't turn over the ball at all. That's how you win games. You get turnovers and you don't commit any, and ultimately led to the Rams' demise. In my opinion, the Falcons' offense is actually rather lackluster. Freeman averaged 3.7 yards a carry on 18 carries, and I attribute his touchdown to Alex Mack more than I give it to him. And Tevin Coleman did even worse, averaging 2.9 yards a carry on 14 carries, so that's not really that fantastic. Julio Jones did pretty good, though, and Mohamed Sanu contributed a huge gain of 52 yards to give him a total of 75 yards on the day. But I don't know, despite the Falcon team suddenly looking scary, it's because the defense stepped up, not because the offense is anything like it was last year. This offense still doesn't strike fear into me at all. But the defense could play like they did against the number one scoring offense. That is something interesting. And also I wanted to add, Farrell Cooper, because I heard you say it, Farrell Cooper's not only going to the Pro Bowl, he was voted first-team All-Pro kick returner. No, punt returner. I can't remember. It's one of the two.
Returner.
He's a returner. He's a first-team All-Pro returner. He's one of them. So I found that funny when he really did awful in this game.
Jeez. He's going to have a long off-season, that's for sure. Excuse me. Well, I guess at the very least, you're absolutely right. If the Falcons can go into LA and can play defense and they can keep the number one scoring offense off the board like that for as long as they did, that bodes well for them for making another run, but I digress. Moving on to Sunday's football action, we had a 1 o'clock kickoff between two playoff-deprived teams, the Jacksonville Jaguars hosting the Buffalo Bills. This game was something, all right. Well, Austin, I guess let's start with our X Factors as we have been. My X Factors were Preston Brown and Allen Hurns. Preston Brown of the Bills finished second on the Bills in tackles and had 2 for a loss. Wasn't a bad day for him on a day that was dominated by defense. He was one of the standouts for the Bills. On the other side, Allen Hurns had 1 target in the entire game. Trash, I guess, is how I'd sum it up. But as is the case when you're playing a game with two good defenses and 2 quarterbacks that are just not very good at throwing the ball. How did your X Factors turn out?
My X Factors were Dawkins and Glenn for the Bills, and they did an okay job. This was the second best rated sack defense, and neither of the 2 sacks in the game came from those 2. So that's good. But Calais Campbell had 4 quarterback hits. However, Yannick was a non-factor, so I guess all in all, good for those 2. And I just mentioned him, but my other X Factor was Calais Campbell. Campbell did really good here. Not the greatest as a pass rusher, but he recorded 4 quarterbacks hits but no sacks. But as a run stopper, he did great. He had 6 tackles, 3 of them being solo. So he was good in this game. And he also had a huge tackle on Tyrod that. I'm sorry. I can't even read. I'm just gonna end it there. He has the 3 solo tackles out of the 6 tackles.
I'm sorry. I'd written a note there for you. What it was there was a 3rd and 1 from the Jaguars' 4-yard line. It was a quarterback draw for Taylor that, he's pretty fast and he's usually going to score on that. But he made a shoestring tackle that made it, at the time, 4th and 1. The Bills got a 1st and goal because of a penalty, but I just wanted to acknowledge that was still a great play.
Okay, yeah, Calais Campbell was a wrecking force in this one. I thought, he has been all year, he deserves Defensive Player of the Year consideration.
Alrighty. Austin, as far as my bold predictions went, again, I missed all over the place here, so I'm giving up on this week. Go ahead.
For this one, I missed my first one. I said that the Jaguars give up no sacks. I was wrong about that, and they also got more than 2 quarterback hits. But my other 2 I actually hit. The Bills finished with less than 150 passing yards. They finished with 133 net passing yards, and even if you don't count the sacks, they finished under 150 as well. And then I should have won with less than 50%, but I got my bold prediction as Tyrod Taylor threw 17 for 37, which is a 45% completion percentage, under the 51% completion percentage in my bold prediction. So I actually hit 2 there. And I'm just going to go straight into the recap of this game. This game, it was a game. It was closer than I had thought it would be. Both offenses did terribly in this game, which I expected from the Bills, but the Jaguars have really struggled as of late. None of the wide receivers for either team surpassed 50 receiving yards. In fact, in total for the Jaguars, they only had 87 receiving yards combined. Bortles and Tyrod just are not that good at passing. However, Bortles used his feet to really lead the Jaguars to victory here. He had 88 rush yards on 10 carries, a career high for him, and those were the only times the Jaguars moved the ball. As even Leonard Fournette struggled here, only getting 57 yards on 21 carries, an average of 2.7 yards a carry. On the touchdown drive they had, Bortles had 20 rushing yards, which really got them there. Also, Bills got no turnovers in the game, while the Jags got 2, including 1 to end the game. Unfortunately, it looks like Pitt product Nathan Peterman is not meant to be an NFL quarterback, as many could have told you, but he has thrown 6 interceptions in about 2 minutes of play, and also he bobbled a snap in one of the 4 snaps he played, and then also got an intentional grounding. So he's just not looking good at all. He is probably, time-wise, if you were to take this time, he's probably the worst quarterback to ever play at the moment, just taking his long strip of playing time. But as I said, he's thrown 6 interceptions in about 2 minutes of play, and while I don't think they would have scored had Tyrod been in, I don't think he would have thrown a pick. It's just it was controversial, the pick. It was hard because the NFL doesn't like to stay constant. He didn't really survive the ground, but who knows? Who knows what a catch is anymore, even on interceptions. But I don't really have much else to say about this game. It was more of a battle of bad offenses, in my opinion, than great defensive play. So it was really uninteresting for me. How about you? What did you see in this game?
I have a question. The Peterman interceptions, he played, you said in 2 minutes of play. How long did he play in the Chargers game? Didn't he play like the first half?
Yeah.
Was it really, he was really on the field for only 2 minutes?
Wait. I meant in this game he was on the field for 2 minutes.
I see.
And then in total he's been on the field for about a half a play.
Okay.
About 2 quarters.
Okay, I was confused.
I might have said that wrong when I went over it. He's been in the game way more than 2 minutes. He played 2 full quarters, and then he played that little 1 minute stretch that ended in an interception in this game.
Yeah, all in total, he played about a half, or like the last quarter of the Saints game, which was a loss in Buffalo. He played the first half of the Chargers game in the last couple minutes here. What does he have? 1 touchdown, like 6 interceptions now. Man, not a good day. Not a good start for Peterman's career. Obviously, he has time to turn it around, but I guess in the scope of this game, on one hand, I can see why people really saw this as a bad game. I really wanted to enjoy this game because I love defensive struggles and I love good defense, but it's tough to complement good defense when you've got 2 quarterbacks who just aren't asked to throw to the middle of the field because they aren't trusted. Before I get into kind of what happened, I just want to acknowledge the effort of LaShawn McCoy in this game. A guy who was carted off the field with an ankle injury a week ago really did give everything he had in this one. And it wasn't enough, but he really is a warrior in my eyes, staring down one of the top, if not the top defensive unit in the league, and leading his team in rushing and receiving at the same time. The quarterback play in this game, Austin, was terrible, as we've acknowledged. The receivers didn't do really anything to help. There were drops on both sides, and I lost count by the third quarter. For most of the game, the Bills were the better team, at least in the first half, but a crucial sequence that led to the first score of the game was kind of botched in my eyes. The Bills had faced several chances to score a touchdown, and it started with a 2nd and 2 from the 4-yard line. The Bills made the decision, or Tyrod Taylor checked out of the play. I can't remember if it was this one or the next one, with a fade route to Kelvin Benjamin that went out of the end zone. I'm not sure why you're running the ball there and you're picking on a guy who is going to the Pro Bowl, probably one of the best, if not the best cornerbacks in the league. So that was questionable. Then the Bills are gifted a first down because of an offsides on the field goal attempt, so they get 3 more downs. Another play, this time the first down, again, Tyrod Taylor throws to Kelvin Benjamin, who gets the pass broken up and is called for pass interference. This pushed the Bills back to the 10-ish, 15-ish yard line, somewhere around there, and they just never recovered. They scored, but they really didn't feel like the winner there. Lorenzo Alexander had a great effort on the Jaguars' touchdown drive on a 3rd and goal, but it was the Oil City native. I forget his name. Let me find it real quick. What's his name? Koyak, the tight end. 1 catch for 1 yard and a touchdown. There were questions about whether or not he held on to the ball, but I believe he did, and the replay officials believed he did as well. That touchdown gave the Jaguars a 10-3 lead, which, I don't know about you, Austin, but that could have seemed like 103 at that point. The Jaguars were not going to be denied. And Blake Bortles may have been awful passing the ball, but he was very effective running the ball. He's a very underrated weapon on the ground. The Bills had no answer for him. Bortles accounted for 59 of the 86 total yards on the game-winning drive. As you mentioned, the 20 coming on the ground on that drive, and he finished with 88 total on the ground. That's more than the 87 he had in the air. The last time a playoff quarterback attempted less than 20 passes and ran for more yards than he threw for was Steve McNair in the last playoff game the Bills played in prior to this weekend. So it's a rough connection for the Bills fans there. The Jaguars quite simply made a few more bigger plays in this one. They got more bigger plays from their quarterback than the Bills did. The second pick by Ramsey is kind of questionable in my eyes, as Austin talked about, the kind of surviving the ground rule with Jesse James in the end zone. You know, it's just, I'm at a loss to understand what the NFL is considering a catch anymore. I really hope this is addressed in the offseason, because I don't see how this can be sort of taken, it's just a joke. I don't understand what it is, and I don't understand how the NFL can continue to ignore it. So here's to not knowing what a catch is. Dilly dilly.
Dilly dilly.
On to the next game. The final game of the weekend probably lived up to the billing of the game of the week, Austin, that we were predicting. The Carolina Panthers and the New Orleans Saints met for the third time this season, and the Saints came out on top in a pretty close game. They went ahead early, but the Panthers came roaring back, but it wasn't enough. The Saints pull out the victory, 31-26, to wrap up this exciting wild card weekend. How did your X Factors turn out in this one?
My X Factors were Michael Thomas, and Luke Kuechly. Well, Michael Thomas caught 8 of his 9 targets for 131 yards with a long of 46, so he did pretty solid. No touchdowns for him, but still a big yardage game and big catches. So Luke Kuechly, on the other hand, only had 4 tackles and 1 quarterback hit. His stats weren't that great. I didn't really feel like I saw him doing much that wasn't on the stat sheet either. I mean, he's always pretty good in coverage, but I don't know. I feel like he wasn't a playmaker that he's been known to be in this game. So that's mine panned out. How did yours pan out?
For the Saints, I had receiver Ted Ginn Jr., and the revenge tour for him continued. He posted 4 more catches for 115 yards and a huge touchdown against his former team. He wasn't as dynamic, in my opinion, as Austin's X Factor, Michael Thomas, but he was very effective in his own right. The other X Factor I had was for Carolina was Christian McCaffrey, the running back. He was fantastic in this game, mainly in the receiving game, hauling in 6 passes for 101 yards, including a long 56-yard touchdown that pulled the Panthers back into the game, where he displayed game-breaking speed and agility. He had only 16 yards on the ground, but he was an important part of the Panthers' success, so I feel like I did do a pretty good job with these X Factors this week. As far as bold predictions go, I was pretty close on a couple of them. Cam Newton finished with over 350 total yards that I was predicting. He actually had 349 in the air and 37 on the ground, so I was 36 yards short, so not super close, but also not really far off either. He finished with 2 touchdowns. I had predicted 2 passing and 1 rushing, so I was short 1 touchdown as well. I predicted 5 sacks on Cam Newton, but the Saints managed to get 4, and they forced Newton into a bad intentional grounding penalty before the final sack. The next one was I was 30 yards short for rushing yards by the Panthers on players not named Cam Newton. That's the one I probably missed the most on. The ground game for the Saints, this is the one I missed the most on. I predicted a huge day for the running backs of the New Orleans Saints, and they were non-factors on the ground. Ingram had 1 catch for 13 yards, which brings his total to what? Not even 40 yards, something like that. And Kamara had 33 total yards. So I was about as far off as I could be for this one. So Austin, on the other hand, you were a lot closer in how you thought this game was going to turn out. But in any case, I was close with my final score prediction. I was only 6 total points off. I had predicted a 35-24 win for the Saints. 4 points off for the Saints, just 2 for the Panthers. So how did your bold predictions turn out in this one?
I hit 2 of them and missed the other one. The first one I got right was that the Saints had 4 sacks and had 2 passes defended at the line, both coming from Cameron Jordan. I wasn't really that was like not really a bold prediction. It's more about calling the numbers exactly. So I was surprised to hit the numbers perfectly with the 4 sacks and 2 passes defended, and both coming from a defensive lineman. So I was happy about that. As soon as I saw that, then the one that I got wrong was Michael Thomas. I predicted to have over 150 yards receiving, and then a long touchdown at 75. But he didn't surpass 150. He got close at 131, but he never even got a touchdown. So I was wrong on that one. And the other prediction I got right was that the Saints would have less than 100 rushing yards. I could have went way lower. I could have went to less than 50 because they had way less, having only 41 total. I knew that this was going to be a game more about throwing, but I just thought Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram were too dynamic to be shut down in such a way. But I'm going to hop straight into my recap again. And the Panthers made it close at the end, but ultimately the Saints came out with the dub. As I said in the preview, I expected a more pass-heavy offense from the Saints in this game, throwing it back to how they've been most of the last decade, and they did. Drew Brees did fantastic, nearly throwing for 400 yards and a 69.7 completion percentage, as well as 2 touchdowns. His sole interception came because the offensive line didn't really block for him on 4th, and he had to force a ball out. He had to just throw it. If he just ran out of bounds, it would have been turnover on down. So he had to just make a throw and hope for the best. And to be honest with you, the interception there was better than the turnover on downs, so it really wasn't too terrible. It was almost like they had a short punt instead. Then with Breeze having a big day, tight ends and wide receivers did well. I already mentioned Michael Thomas, so I'm omitting him. Ted Ginn had 4 catches for 115 yards and a long 80-yard touchdown. And tight end Sean Hill, while only catching 3 balls for 49 yards, made all his catches count, as all of them were clutch, and one was for a touchdown. I won't lie, though, the Saints defense disappointed me a little bit. Von Bell came in clutch at the end, who I was actually a fan of him when he was in the draft 2 years ago. But I felt like they were better than that. I felt like they could have picked Newton off or at least forced a turnover. They'll basically need to against the Vikings' hot offense next week, and they also looked steamed in the second half, giving up 17 of 26 points there, 14 of them being in the fourth quarter. That being said, though, Cam Newton was playing really well, throwing for nearly 350 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. It was reminiscent of league MVP Cam Newton a couple of years back, but alas, his play wasn't good enough to keep up with the Saints' great offense, despite having 200-yard receivers. Clay dropped a perfectly placed touchdown, and the Panthers had to settle for 3 early in the game. Being down 1 at the end of the game could have changed the entire game for the Panthers, but that key drop really hurt the Panthers in the end. Also, the Panthers' lack of pass rush in this game really killed them. They only got 1 sack in this game and 4 quarterback hits, not nearly enough to worry veteran quarterback Drew Brees, and that really made all the difference. Because while the Saints couldn't really rush, they didn't need to when they had no pressure on them on passing downs. So what did you see from the two teams in this game?
Well, starting with the Panthers, they missed a ton of opportunities, and especially early on, despite a furious rally from Cam Newton and company, it was not enough. A Graham Gano missed field goal that came early on, I think it was their second drive, loomed large when the Saints went up 7-3 and 14-3. This wasn't just a missed field goal. It was a 25-yard field goal. This is less than an extra point. Less distance than an extra point. The Panthers did their best later in the game, and I felt like they successfully took away the Saints' bread and butter this year, which has been the ground game. But, you know, he's a future Hall of Famer for a reason. Drew Brees looked like his normal old self today, giving a vintage Brees performance against an overmatched Panthers secondary. But with the game on the line, it was a defense that came through with a couple of huge plays. Cam Newton's controversial intentional grounding set the stage for the perfect defensive play call on a situation where Newton would have to wait a few seconds to throw the ball, and a perfectly timed blitz came right up the middle, and it was too fast for Newton, and he took the sack to end the game. I know that Newton didn't have many other options, but you really cannot take a sack in that situation. The Saints defense held tough and didn't play as well as Austin had mentioned, as we had probably anticipated, but if you're the Panthers, you're kicking yourself in this game. The way I look at it is that great teams find ways to win games, and in this game, the Saints found a way to win this game, even if their defense didn't have their best day and they didn't have their top offensive weapons. This is definitely still a dangerous team going forward. So now that Wild Card Weekend is over with, if you will, Austin, we're moving on to the divisional round. Let's start with the 4 teams that have advanced. Which win was the most impressive in your eyes on Wild Card Weekend, and why?
For me, it was the Titans. The teams were heavy favorites, and many ruled the Titans out, including myself. I didn't think it would be possible for them. I thought the chances were very little, but they still managed to do it. And while you could attribute the Chiefs shooting themselves in the foot, I still think it's impressive that the Titans were able to make an 18-point comeback all in the second half. Like, that to me was impressive, and it showed heart by them. It's not like they even gave up on what they were. They stuck to the run. They kept using Derrick Henry, even though obviously running runs down the clock, because they had confidence in their technical backup running back, and that they had confidence in what the team has been good at, which is rushing. So I thought the Titans win was the most impressive. Which win for you was the most impressive?
For me, it was the Atlanta Falcons, and I have a couple of reasons for this. One, looking at the playoff picture at the start of the playoffs, I thought any NFC team could really make it to the Super Bowl, but I don't think any team, let me back up here. I thought any team from the NFC could have made it to the Super Bowl, but I thought the Falcons were the least likely team. They impressed me the most, not just because they won or because they won up early because of turnovers by the Rams, but it had more to do with the fact that they stifled the league's best scoring offense and arguably the league's MVP. Even though he had a good stat line, he wasn't overly impactful in this game, and the Rams just looked uneven on offense. Suddenly, with the matchup with the Philadelphia Eagles missing their starting quarterback, this bodes well for the Falcons going forward, and all of a sudden, a week after looking like they might be one and done in the playoffs, here they come. They could be right back in the NFC Championship game, and I'd have to like their chances in that game. But, 1 week at a time. So following up on the last episode, do you still believe that the Saints are the most dangerous team coming from the wild card round, as we said that we thought they were last week?
Yep. They versed a team that played and lost them 2 other times before this. They knew what they were versing coming in, so they had a good chance of keeping it close here. You saw them shut down what the Saints have been good at this season, the running game. But despite having their arguable 2 most important weapons from the season shut down in this game, the Saints still answered on offense, loudly, screaming that, don't forget, we still have Drew Brees and have been a pass-happy offense for a long time. This is new territory with the run game. So if anything to me, the Saints look even more unstoppable because they showed that even when what their identity this year was taken away, they just went back and started using Drew Brees again like he has been in the past. So I am actually more hyped up about the Saints. I think that the Saints are going to the Super Bowl this year. I don't remember if I called that. I think I picked the Vikings, actually. But I think I'm ready to switch it to the Saints. I'm not going to switch it literally. I'm going to stick with my Vikings prediction, but because I can't remember which I picked. But this team looks dangerous to me, the most dangerous team in the NFC at the moment. So what do you think?
I agree with you, Austin, but I think it's a little closer now than I thought it was, and that's mainly because even though the Panthers did shut down the Saints' passing attack, the Panthers do have a bad pass defense. The Saints are still definitely the best team to win from this weekend, but the Vikings do not have a bad pass defense, and they have one of the top cornerbacks in the league in Xavier Rhodes. Combining that with the fact that the Saints won't be at home and the Falcons won the way they did, it makes me think the gap between these 2 teams is a little bit closer. But that being the case, I still think the Saints are by far the most dangerous team in the NFC, and not just of the wild card winners. I mean the entire NFC playoffs. So I guess let's look back and we'll kind of reflect on the 4 losers quickly, evaluating them briefly. The Chiefs, who lost to the Titans, the Rams, who lost to the Falcons, the Bills, who lost to the Jaguars, and the Panthers, who lost to the Saints. I guess let's look at their seasons quickly, and I guess where's the arrow pointing for them? Are they going to return to the playoffs next year? Are they blowing it up next year? Kind of what's going on for each team?
Well, the Rams have a bright future ahead, and I think we will see them return. But honestly, they're the best to be eliminated here, in my opinion. I have high hopes for honestly, while they are the best to be eliminated here, in my opinion, I have high hopes for the 49ers with Jimmy Garoppolo next season. And while Seattle missed the playoffs this year, with some O-line help and a starting running back in free agency and/or the draft, they could easily return despite probably losing some defensive pieces. Panthers have the next best chance after the Rams, as Drew Brees could be done as soon as after this season. And despite still having an overall good team, quarterback is the most important position. So if the Saints can't find a quarterback, I can't even see them returning. They also have the Falcons to deal with as well, the Panthers, but who knows? Maybe the big 3 from the NFC South return again next year. As for Chiefs, there's a lot of question marks. Will Alex Smith be starting next season? If not, is Patrick Mahomes going to be as good as he was in the first game he had against the Broncos? Will Kareem Hunt have a sophomore slump like a guy like Gurley did? How will they improve their defense and free agency in the draft when they don't have a first-round pick? Obviously, Bills own it because they traded away. So many questions. But ultimately, I don't think they return next year. I feel as though the Chargers have just been waiting on their return to the playoffs, and next year is the year for their return, in my opinion. I don't think the Chiefs will do enough to improve their defense, and that's just the end of the story. As for the Bills, I give a 5% chance of them making it back. They probably won't have Tyrod Taylor anymore, and Peterman is not the answer. So they're going to need a quarterback badly, as well as addressing some other positions, like possibly adding a wide receiver in back-to-back drafts. Maybe not first round like they did Zay Jones, but still, I think they need a lot of help, and mostly on offense. And hopefully those 2 first-round picks that they have this year will do it, but I'm not quite sure. I don't have much faith in the Bills. How about for you? What do you think is going to come for these 4 teams that lost?
Well, I'll start with the Chiefs, and as you already touched on, they're facing a ton of questions this year. And first and foremost, it's a quarterback. Is Alex Smith even going to be on this team next year? It's possible. They hinted at trading him this offseason. Beyond that, how much has the leash been shortened for Andy Reid after another playoff collapse? How do you win a playoff game at home? That's something the Chiefs are still trying to figure out. The arrow is kind of spinning right now because we don't know what's going to go, but you're thinking it's probably heading downwards. The defense is just not very good, and the questions at the quarterback position just loom large. So I'm not sure about this team. The other losing team on Saturday was the LA Rams. They probably have the arrow pointing up the most, and they have just recently had one of the biggest turnarounds in recent memory. So one would think they'd be back in the playoffs soon, but making the playoffs is no easy task, especially in the division they play in. The maturity of Jared Goff and the improving rush defense will be what the Rams are going to be keeping an eye on this season, but the arrow is pointing up. The Bills made it back to the playoffs for the first time in 17 years, but I honestly don't think they'll be back next year. They have serious questions at the quarterback position, and Tyrod Taylor isn't going to be back, most likely, so Nathan Peterman isn't going to be the guy. Is it going to be a draft pick, or is it going to be a guy like Kirk Cousins or Alex Smith? Either way, the quarterback position is the top need here. Finding one that works and fits in perfectly is not something that usually takes 1 year to fix. Beyond that, the defense was good this year, but not really great. So that means that the Bills need more weapons on offense as well. The AFC is weaker than the NFC, so there's still a chance, but I can't put faith in their quarterback situation right now, and I don't believe that their defense is all that great. So, in my opinion, the arrow's pointing down there. The Panthers, the last team here, they showed last season's disappointment after a Super Bowl appearance hangover was a fluke, and the defense wasn't as good as it was the last couple years, but the culprit actually might be the offense here. The lack of weapons on the outside and an aging Jonathan Stewart needs to be addressed. They're likely to have Christian McCaffrey taking over in the running game, and I think they're probably the best team that was eliminated this weekend, maybe outside of the Rams, but their outlook isn't too bad, considering the Bucs look like a dumpster fire right now, and as Austin said, the Saints look really good right now, but they could need a new quarterback as early as next year, so it looks like for now the Falcons are going to be their main competition in the division, so the arrow is pointing up right now. Another tidbit of NFL news to get to now that we've finished up here. I don't know if you saw, but offensive coordinator of the Chiefs, Matt Nagy, was named head coach of the Bears. So that'll be an interesting kind of combination with the number 1 draft pick, Mitchell Trubisky. So we'll see how that turns out. Is there anything else you wanted to say about Wild Card Weekend before we kind of shut the door on the first weekend of NFL playoff football in 2018?
No, I think we're good.
Alrighty. We will be back later in the week with a preview episode of the Steelers and Jaguars and the rest of the divisional playoffs coming up. 12 teams entered this weekend with a chance to win the Vince Lombardi Trophy. Only 8 teams remain. There will be only 4 teams by next Monday, so we'll keep you in tune with everything that's going on, including round 2 of the Steelers and Jaguars. It'll be right here on the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions about the show, feel free to email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com and check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. Thank you for joining us again today, and Austin, you have a fantastic day. As always, thank you for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast.
Good night.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.